Hello, Manibil here. Ready for the next part of my review of Universally Preferable Behaviour, a book by Stefan Molyneux about ethics. And I'm just heading further into the book, leaving off from where I finished in the last part. But before that, I would like to make a few notes about what we learned, or I learned, from the first part, and also a few corrections before I continue the review. And also, this software I'm using, StreamYard, I haven't figured out how to have more than one window ready for sharing on the screen here. So when I switch from this document here to the PDF of the book, there might be some, a little small shifting over to the other document that may not look that cool technically. So, but I have made some notes after part one, and one thing that I missed was ground rule 7. So for some reason I skipped that. It was not it was by mistake. So maybe I should get that one ready. Let me see. I can get it ready here, and I'll switch over. So I have another share. I have to remove this one. Add to stream, remove from stream, stop screen. That's it. And share. Excuse me for this uncool. There it is. And ground rule 7 says, I do have great respect for the ethical instincts of mankind. The near universal social prohibitions on murder, rape, assault, and theft are facts. I would strongly disagree with that, but we will get back to it. I am pretty sure these are terms that will end up somewhere later in the and I'll have to add something here in my notes. That's a word I hadn't added before I read this ground rule 7. And that any rational ethicist discards at his peril. This is a very liberal way of putting. I mean, it's annoying to me when you're talking about sort of near universal. What does that mean? It's not universal, it's near universal. What is universality? Social prohibitions, is that the state? What are we talking about? And then he just slings out murder, rape, assault, and theft without defining what they are, as if everybody understands what it is and how they are judged, or is he using the scientific method now? Or and then this, that any rational ethicist discards at his peril. Now, I'm not the greatest to read English, but discarding at his peril is like, if you discard it, it's a bad thing. Or peril, that is like you will be eliminated, or something like that. But is it only rational ethicists that discards it if you're irrational or something like that? And what does rational mean in this context? So the way the whole thing is formulated is unnecessarily convoluted and taking so many things for granted that the reader understands, and so on, right? Okay, Aristotle argued that any ethical theory that can be used to prove that rape is moral must have something wrong with it, to say the least. Okay, I'm not going to say that whether or not Aristotle argued about rape. I don't know. I haven't read the Nicomachean Ethics. So if or where else it might have been mentioned, I don't know if this is this is like a sort of Occam razor kind of approach, that there's something that is so bad that it must be wrong, right? But the point is that saying rape is wrong, and it's not to diminish rape when and if it occurs, but saying rape is wrong is like saying wrong kind of sex is wrong, and you are actually just saying wrong sex without referring to anything, or you're saying this sex that has attached the attribute of being wrong is wrong, right? You're pointing to a red apple and saying that's a red apple. I mean, but you are attempting to do that actually, right? You are attempting to see that red apple has redness, but that's not the way rape, theft, and murder and so on works, because you can't point to the morality of it. You can't point to say that thing over there has immorality or immoral or ought not. That's exactly what Hume says. You can't point to anything, point to some sex over there and say, see, there's the immorality, that's immoral, there it is, and pointing to something that is either a sound or a color or a taste or anything. You can't do that. What would it be, right? So I'm not saying that the ideas of murder, rape, assault, and so on are fictitious ideas. They are probably good, but they can't be used as a foundation to point to immorality, because there's nothing to point to, right? This is a very big problem in how he argues. Thus, after I have developed a framework for validating ethical theories, I run these generally accepted moral premises. Now it's moral premises. I need to add that to the list also. What are moral premises? And I'll put murder, rape, assault, theft on here. These are the moral premises he mentions. And yes, through that framework to see whether or not they hold true. Okay, so he is saying a lot here, actually, right? After I have developed a framework for validating ethical theories. Okay, so this is what he's going to do. He's going to develop. So what does develop mean? Is that philosophy to develop something? Is he talking, I'm going to do this philosophy to arrive at a framework, but develop, what does that mean? To me, that sounds like an engineering company, right? Now I know I am being particular about the words he uses. He may have a fine understanding in his head when he writes this, right? But he has to be precise because the reader does not know what he thinks. So develop, what does that entail? So there's a confusion about what he is trying to do, but when he has done what he's going to do, he can always go back to say, but I told you I was going to develop. And then you say, okay, I guess I didn't understand where you were going. So you are sort of dragging the reader along without pretending you're telling them all sorts of important things, which are actually not that easy to understand what the hell you're trying to do, right? So this is the most clear formulation, though, I have seen yet, even if he has mentioned it before, that so he's saying, I will develop a framework for validating ethical theories. Right? He will develop a framework for validating ethical theories, and that's worth pointing out. Is that is what he's trying to do, right? So I'll put it in here. So just a sec. So I hope you're the kind of person who has a lot of patience. Oh, I shouldn't sing. I'm very bad at singing. All right. So back to the PDF here. I run these generally accepted moral premises. Generally accepted. How the hell does he know? I mean, to see whether or not they hold true. People, there's a difference between I'm going to adhere to these premises or moral premises in my community, my country, my family, whatever cult you're in, but that doesn't mean you accept them. Yeah, you accept them because otherwise you'll be thrown out in the woods, right? But accepting in this fashion is not necessarily because these are correct or these are philosophically well formulated or anything like that, right? So it's really BS, this, right? It's very, very bad philosophy, in my opinion. Okay, so back to the notes. I'll have to get back somehow here. Excuse me once again. Yeah, share, dude. So, notes after part 1. I missed ground rule 7, which I just went through. And then I noticed that, first of all, I mentioned, I said in an earlier part that it was from 2006. It is from 2007. And I went back into freedomain and downloaded the so-called latest version, the version that is available on freedomain for free, by the way, is version number 1 from 2007. And now we are writing 2021. And this means that it is 14 years of no revisions, at least no public revisions. That's the only conclusion you can draw, right? It's still version 1 from 2007, and stating that something is version 1 is sort of implicitly indicating that there might be further versions in the future. Now, 14 years of critique and, people trying to say there might be this wrong and there might be that wrong and this might be begging the question and whatever. People saying I have 13 fallacies you might have committed in your book here, and nothing, no revision at all in 14 years of people trying to communicate it with this man, right? So just in these forewords here and ground rules, I pointed out several things that might need a little tweaking, let's say, right? But there's no new version, right? He did make 2 videos in 2007 or 2008, somewhere around there, called Redux and Revisited or something like that. So 2 videos where he sort of goes in and sort of just clarifies what he means when he's in his book, right? But he hasn't, revised his book to accommodate any sort of additional knowledge or additional understanding he has had during these 14 years, right? It's like, it must be perfect because I've written it 14 years ago, so it must be perfect. There cannot possibly be anything wrong with my holy grail, right? 14 years and no revisions of this, well, book, okay? I'm not going to say anymore. Okay, so first of all, there are important terms from the title and the ground rules and so on in this first part that needs further explanation or definition or clarification or so. He mentions a lot of stuff that would be lovely to have some sort of definition of, or sort of just some handling, so the reader knows that I know what you mean when you use that. I may have an idea, but there's this whole host of terms and that needs some kind of definition or clarification, and combinations of words that are not usually combined to mean something, right? In like universality, preferability, behavior, rationality, proof, secularism. Why is it interesting that it's secular? What does it mean? Truth, and I have mentioned truth twice, but truth in the sense, what does he mean when he say truth, right? What's a fact? What is objectivity? And particularly in the definition of ethics, because he talks about this finding an objective definition of ethics. Can ethics be objective? I just pointed out that you can't point to the immorality of something, just as Hume said, without pointing out how you observe it, right? You have to say, I sense this, I sense that, and that is the immorality or the ought not part, right? And he just said, I accept Hume, and then he just in the next paragraph he says murder is wrong, right? Like he's saying something about morality. So he doesn't even know what the hell he's talking about, right? Subjectivity, consistency, empiricism, methodology, validation or validity. And then he talks about truth instincts and truth intuitions. What does that mean? What's an instinct or intuition of truth? What about these moral premises, murder, rape, assault, and theft? What's a moral premise? Premises are not moral, right? If you're saying is, ought, none of these premises that has is have any moral content, right? Exactly, because you can't point to that, as Hume says, right? So premises can't be moral. Morality is must somehow be something you attach to premises, right? So you have to say, what is it that moral part I attach to murder or rape, assault, or theft, right? So big problem. And at the same time, a refusal to define or explain terms has been put forth, as if to say, if you want definitions of specific metaphysics or epistemology under the guise of efficiency. Yeah, he's saying, well, you're such an intelligent person, you don't need definitions. I'm not going to, tell you anything because you're so wise, you know this already. And he doesn't have to explain anything because we need to get on. This is a big task I'm set myself. We don't have time to define anything, right? This is sort of a red flag that's like, I don't know what I'm talking about, right? I don't want to be, hung up on any kind of definition or anything, right? Okay. Another thing that he says is, yeah, that's the quote here. I respect your intelligence. Yeah, exactly. He also says, we do not judge the value of scientific experiments according to some Platonic higher realm or some utilitarian optimization, which is actually a misspelling according to my spell checker, but I would let that pass. They are judged in accordance with the scientific method. I will take the same approach in this book. Okay, I've been trying to think what the hell he's trying to say with this, right? And I feel it's important because he says, I will take the same approach in this book. So if what that approach he is referring to does not make any sense, how will I know that he's using that approach? And if he's using it, what the hell is he doing, right? Okay, he says the value of scientific experiments, are judged in accordance with the scientific method. So he's saying the value of scientific experiments are just in accordance with the scientific method. But it's the experiment that is in accordance with the scientific method, not the value of the experiment, right? The value of that experiment is purely a subjective notion, whether or not that experiment is value to you. I could do a lot of experiments in my house here, but it probably wouldn't be, valuable to me. So I'll rather sit here and do this because this is valuable to me. So there's nothing particularly about the scientific is particularly not used to judge value. So, and if it means something different than this, then that using a scientific method in experiments creates some value if that experimental result has a sort of ends up being valuable to you. Yes, I agree. But then it's absolutely freaking awful formulation he has made here, right? That is bound to be so confusing that nobody can understand what he's saying, right? Or he's as good as sure that people will misinterpret what he means. The only way you should understand this correctly is that the scientific method creates value. Is that which, no, it doesn't create value. It's how you judge whether something is valuable or not. You use a scientific method to figure out whether something is valuable. It's complete freaking BS, right? It's absolutely nonsense. I have not spent years of my life, another quote, I have not spent years of my life working on a theory of ethics in order to run around proving that murder is wrong. That's a kind of snarky way of putting it, right? As if the reader has attempted to blame him for something. He says, I have not spent years of my important life on a theory of ethics in order to run around and proving that murder is wrong. Well, maybe you should prove murder is wrong. You should prove the wrongness of the term murder. Point to that. How do you see the wrongness? That's essential. That's Hume's law. That's Hume's insert gap. Explain how you get to that. Developing a framework. He's developing to develop a framework for validating ethical theories. That's the goal here, right? Okay, a few things he mentions that would be very interesting to see if there comes a further clarification, and that is the problem of subjectivism, which he mentions 3 or 4 times without explaining what exactly he means. And then Hume's law, which is very important to handle in some way or another, are the further references later. So, and if he does something that relates to this Hume's law and doesn't point out that now we're dealing with Hume's law, I'm trying to go to point it out, right? The scientific method's place in ethics. Yes, it's a weird way we just discussed how he uses the scientific method, and it's not clear how this scientific method is a part of ethics. I'm not saying that it isn't. I mean, I'm pretty sure that there's some place in ethics for scientific method and how this should be used within an ethical moral principle, right? Intuitive knowledge or truths, what is that? Ethics versus a system of ethics. Is he talking about meta-ethics here, or is he doing ethics? If ethics is trying to get to a moral principle, then I would say he's doing meta-ethics of some kind. But still, he's trying to make something that is not thinking about ethics, but ethics that doesn't go all the way to a moral principle. It says, I'm going to this point, and then you figure out what the moral principle is, right? It's sort of a chickening out. he's run a marathon, and then 5 meters before the goal, he says, okay, you do the rest. Why don't you make a moral principle? Why are you chickening out? Just do it, man. Why are you say, okay, I'll go to here, and then you find some more principle, right? Okay. I'll share the other screen again. Oops, 1 second, please. There we are. Okay, and I have to have the PDF open for myself here. The beast is down, yes. And this one. Okay, so now we are at the introduction. And I'll take a sip of my coffee. I need my drug. Introduction. For countless generations, mankind lived in a kind of egocentric womb of self-imposed ignorance. The world was flat, the sun, moon, and stars revolved around him. Ancestors beckoned to him from beyond the mists of death, and thunder was the anchor of the gods. Burrowing out from this narcissistic womb of subjective interpretation required the labor of millennia and cost the lives of millions. The effort required to wrench our perspective from perceptual experience to conceptual logic. Perceptual experience to conceptual logic. Okay, it must be evaluated further what it means. Was terrifying, exhilarating, highly disorienting, and extremely dangerous. Understanding that the world was not what it felt like or seemed like was and remains the greatest feat of our intelligence. The truth of reality turned out to be in the eyes of the mind, not of the flesh. The world looks flat. It is not. But how do you know? Isn't it flat? When I walk on, there's flatness to it, right? I know I'm a bit provocative here, but it's flat when I walk on it. But it may be roundish as far as I can see. But what you are saying that it's not flat, but it's not. It can't be not. The world can't be not. Right? What is the world? Are you talking about Earth? The world looks flat. What is the world compared to the Earth? And the Earth can't be not. It can be something that you explain, right? These kind of the way he uses words is sort of deliberately fluffy in a way, right? And deliberately very sort of some artistic freedom or something. And you should at all costs avoid this kind of language in a philosophical debate or a philosophically geared argumentation or description or whatever you want to call it. It's just annoying, right? The sun and the moon look the same size. They are not. The stars seem to move around the earth. They do not. Okay, he knows everything. He knows what shape the earth has. It must be a reference to knowledge, right? How does he know what shape the earth has? With reference to my way of understanding knowledge, you have to have the impression of it to know it. Does he have the impression of this shape of the earth? No, I believe he doesn't, or believe that he didn't have when he wrote the book in 2007. I don't know what he's experiencing now, but as he wrote that word, did he experience the shape of earth? I suppose not. So how does he have all this knowledge? Well, actually, he don't. he has read somewhere that somebody has seen and somebody has done calculation and somebody has, but somebody writing something in a book is not your knowledge. You are not experiencing what that book is maybe referencing. A reference to something is not knowledge of something. You must really keep that clear. And I'm talking to the audience, not to Stefan Molyneux, but I'm not sure he would understand it. But you have to experience that which you claim you know. Otherwise, you cannot make the proposition, right? You cannot point to the shape of Earth without being able to point to the shape of Earth. Learning the truth requires that we see the world from outside our senses. What? The truth? Holy shit, man. Learning the truth. I need to cut that out immediately. Learning the truth, the truth, the truth. There's one truth. I need some juice on my laptop here, so hang on. It's a little tricky, this adapter. There's a problem with connectivity sometimes. So it should work now. Okay. This is a serious one. Holy F. Learning the truth, is he saying any kind of truth? Or is he saying that everything is one truth? Or that there is only one truth? Can you only point in your whole life, for everybody can only point once and say, that's an elephant, true or false, right? And then done, that was the truth. There's no more truth. Sorry, we have run out of truth, like a Monty Python sketch, right? He must mean you cannot have truth without seeing the world from outside your senses. It's a contradiction of the absolute worst kind. See the world, see with your eyes. Eyes are senses. How can you see something outside what you see? Can anybody see a problem here? Holy crap, what a crackpot, man. See the world from outside your senses, our senses. So it's not only not your senses, it is our senses. It's a collective of senses, right? This does not mean a rejection of our senses. Okay, I'm happy about that. But an airtight compliance, an airtight compliance. Well, airtight, I'll have to look that up in my philosophy book. Airtight compliance with the real evidence of the senses. The real evidence, is this the other realm he's talking about, where the real evidence is? The forms? The higher realm, is that the higher realm, is that which is outside your senses? So now you're sort of applying an external realm that you have access to that is outside your senses. But how the hell did you know it's there if you can't sense it? So now you're talking about things you can't sense. Which is not that the world is flat, but the matter, energy, and physical laws are consistent. I'll have to take that again. I was kicking myself a bit off the rails there, laughing. But an airtight compliance with the real evidence of the senses. Oh, so he's talking about the correct interpretation of the senses, of what you experience, let's say, right? When the stick is bent in water and so on, is the stick bent or is it straight, right? That must be what he means. When we let go of a rock in our hand, it falls. It doesn't it necessarily need to fall, if you mean it has to move closer to my feet if I'm standing up. If there's an updrift of air or something, it might fly upwards, right? So, but if falling is any kind of movement in a sort of gravitational sense of the word, okay, this is the real evidence of the senses, not that the earth is fixed and immovable. The idea that the world is immobile is an incorrect assumption that contradicts the direct evidence of our senses, which is that everything falls. If everything falls, the world cannot be fixed and immovable. I'm not sure. You would have to go into some Einstein's relativity or something. There's these ideas of frame of reference in relativity. Yeah, if you choose the Earth to be immovable, the rest moves according to the Earth. It's not that things move. It's about choosing where you stand and watch things move, right? A good example is, okay, if I'm standing, let's say I'm standing and there's a train passing by me, like in front of me, as parallel to my visual field, right? Or sort of perpendicular to my direction of view, right? And let's say there's a train in front of me and a person stands there and kicks a ball up in the air, right? And sort of every time the ball comes down, he throws it up again, it comes down, throws it up. If that train stands still and I'm looking at it, I will see, if I couldn't see anything else, I would see a ball go up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. But if that train moved, if that train wagon moved and sort of passed by me and I could only see the ball, I would see a zigzag pattern like this, where the ball would go up and down in a zigzag. But from the point of view at the guy with the ball, to him, the ball is still going up and down, up and down. So which one is the correct interpretation? There's no correct interpretation of that. If I was turning around on a spinning wheel, or I was jumping up and down and moving to the left and right, there would be a new pattern. It all comes down to fixating yourself to this is my point of reference, and I'm describing everything else in relation relative to my point. So it seems to me that you don't even understand the absolute basic of relativity. Okay, these are the little truths of the everyday. The little truths. Now he's inventing a whole new category of truth. Why do you do that? Is it necessary to invent a whole? It's a sign of problems if you need to invent a whole new category or a whole new system of truth in order to describe what you mean. It's a sign of weakness, in my opinion, right? And it's confusing because, okay, now I have to, my mind has to be geared towards, okay, what does he mean, the little truth? And then when you read, you get bogged down in understanding this, and then you sort of, there's a risk that you lose when you have this overview of what he's talking about. You lose that focus and get down in focus on these minute details about what is a little truth, right? So I'm not saying it's incorrect or anything. It's just an annoying way of throwing the reader around. I'll take a little sip of my junk. Sorry, my drug, I meant. These are the little truths of the everyday. That rocks fall, smoke rises, fire is hot, and the sun and the moon are both round. Yes, I can know that the moon is round if it's a full moon and I go out and look at the sky and point and say, that moon is round, right? I could actually arrive at some kind of objectivity. If my daughter stands beside me and she points to it and say, yes, the moon is round, then we have an objective experience of that object. But the earth is something different. You cannot point to the earth, right? You cannot point to the earth and say, see, it's round. So you can experience its roundness. This is very important. It's very, very important. If we remain steadfastly, rigorously committed to these little truths, we can in time derive the great truths of physics, which provides us such awesome knowledge and power. No, it's not knowledge that you have a scientific method. Physics is not knowledge. It's a convention on how to do certain things. Physics itself is not knowledge. It's a system. It's a method, right? It's a way of describing things. It's actually philosophy, right? In between the little truth and the great truth, however, are the illusions that blind us, both in physics and in ethics. The great truth, said here, in time derive the great truths of physics. But could you point to a great truth, please? Is that sort of Newton's law? Is that a great truth, or is that the kind of thing he's referring to? In between the little truth and the great truth, however, are the illusions that blind us, both in physics and in ethics. Okay. In physics, the great truth cannot contradict the little truth. No unified field theory can validly contradict our direct sense experience of a falling rock or a rising flame. The greatest mathematical theory cannot be valid if applying it returns incorrect change at the checkout counter. Again, there's this, artistic liberty in how to describe things, right? If I didn't know, I would guess that he has been trying to become a fiction writer at some point. It wouldn't be totally off the handle, right? Applying it returns incorrect change. The greatest mathematical theory cannot be valid if applying it returns incorrect change at the checkout counter. I guess it's like if you have a mathematical theory that spits out numbers or results that sticks in the wrong direction, it's not a great mathematical theory. No, I would agree. But okay. Historically, however, in between our own little truth, and the great truth lies what I will call the null zone. Now we have a third category nobody has heard about before, right? Little truth, great truth, and the null zone. The null zone? Okay. The null zone. Speak for yourself. Okay, would you mind please speak for yourself? It's your philosophy. We tell our children not to punch each other. And what is punch? So punch is a morally loaded word, isn't it? Punch is a wrong way of, touching. If you say we tell our children not to touch each other, it would sound weird, but punch, okay, there's something additional to it. What is it? Again, but this will be something he will possibly repeat again and again and again and again and again until you think he's saying something about morality. And we believe that violence is wrong in the abstract as a general moral rule. The little truth is don't punch. The great truth is violence is wrong. So he's saying that violence is, again, it's the same thing again. Violence is a wrong way of touching. So a wrong way of touching is wrong. There's no great truth in that, right? Where is the truth? It's not even a proposition. You are pointing to some touchy thing and saying it has wrongness, therefore it's wrong. What the hell is the great truth about that? It isn't even a fucking proposition. However, there exists in our minds an imaginary entity called God. Does it exist in our mind? It's not in my mind, I can tell you. And this entity is considered perfectly moral. By who? Not by me. Go away with that BS, right? Unfortunately, this entity continually and grossly violates the edict that violence is wrong by drowning the world, consigning souls to hell despite a perfect foreknowledge of their decisions, sanctioning rape, murder, theft, assault, and other actions that would condemn us utterly evil in any individual. Okay, this is for the Christians and the atheists, right? Thus, we have the little truth, don't punch, and the great truth, violence is wrong. But in the middle, we have this null zone where the complete opposite of both our little truth and our great truth is considered perfectly true. Okay, I'm not sure I get. Is it that these exceptions that there are some people who say, yeah, you must pay taxes to me, but you can't go up to me and say that I should pay taxes to you. I'm the one telling you to pay taxes. So is this that kind of thing we're dealing with? Historically, we can see the same inconsistency in physics. There are no perfect circles in our direct experience, but because of a belief in God, all planetary motion had to be a perfect circle. Well, yeah, I understand. That retarded astronomy for centuries. Yes, sure. Similarly, if a man turns his head, that was, the Ptolemean epicircle thing there, right? Similarly, if a man turns his head, he does not reasonably believe that the entire world rotates around him. And he would happily put this forward as not just his own little truth, but as a great truth, a universal principle. Yet for most of human history, it was believed that the stars and planets rotated around the Earth rather than the Earth rotated. Rather than that the Earth rotated. Okay. Here again, we can see the null zone between direct sense experience and the universal principle, where entirely opposite principles are considered to be perfectly valid. Yeah, I guess there's a point there, but I don't care about what weird people believe, right? It's mostly, child abuse. It's children who have been forced to believe something or they wouldn't get anything to eat, right? So that people have their brains smashed is not a good argument. It's not a good argument in philosophy. No sane man experiences God directly in his daily life. He fully accepts that which cannot be perceived does not exist. No reasonable man flinches every time he takes a step, fearing an invisible wall might be barring his way. The greatest abstractions of science support his approach. Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Conversely, in the null zone of religion, the exact opposite of both the little truth and the great truth is believed to be true. Personally, a man believes that which cannot be perceived does not exist. Intellectually, no, but there's a little problem with that statement. That which cannot be perceived does not exist, but you don't have access to things you cannot perceive. It's like saying, I have knowledge of what cannot be known. I have knowledge about what can't be known. But how did you get that knowledge then? If it can't be known, how did you get knowledge of it? So it's a paradox. It's a paradoxical statement. That which cannot be perceived. That now I know he's referring to somebody, a third party, who claims this. It's not necessarily Stefan Molyneux' claim, but be very careful to bring in something that is bad philosophy, right? However, in the null zone of theology, the exact opposite proposition holds true. The axiom there is that which cannot be perceived must exist. Okay. Our belief in the virtue of the military also lies in the null zone. If a private man is paid to murder another man, we call him a gun for hire and condemn him as a hitman. If, however, this man puts on a green costume with certain ribbons and commits the same act, we hail him as a hero, reward him with a pension. Yeah, that's true. The little truth, I should not murder, is perfectly consistent with that great truth, murder is wrong. Yet in the middle there lies a null zone where murder magically becomes virtuous. Okay, you didn't talk about it being virtuous exactly, but okay. I see where it's getting at. So I sort of agree about how people tend to work around all the bullshit in their culture, right? So, but this is not necessarily very good philosophy, but at least it's some kind of entry point into start talking about these things. If this null zone is valid, then no logical proposition can hold. If a proposition is true and the exact opposite of that proposition is also true, then logical reason becomes impossible. I would agree. The growth of rational science has been the steady attack upon this null zone and the incursion of objective inconsistency into these mad little pockets of subjective whim. I would agree, I think. But I'm still skeptical. In old maps, before cartographers had finished their explorations, the drawings of known lands would fade into blank paper. The growth of knowledge requires first a delineation of what is not known, and then an expansion of known principle into the unknown areas. Oh yeah, it's a good method. The same is true in the realm of morality. Okay, that's just a claim. The same is true. You're just claiming something. Now you talked about things that move and gods and null zones and all sort of. The same is true in the realm of morality. Why didn't you talk more about the realm of morality and the truth within that, instead of having a long talk about something else and then say what I'm going to talk about is the same, right? It's an annoying way of keeping you away from the essential talks or the essential philosophy. Okay. The casualties. Crossing this null zone, fraught with peril, is fraught with peril. The road from the little truth to the great truth is paved with the bones of millions. From the death of Socrates to the torture of early scientists by religious zealots, to the millions who have murdered and died for the black fantasies of fascism and communism and forward thrust of human knowledge into the null zone, is fraught with considerable danger. Well, I will give a thumbs up to that. Must crossing the null zone or seamlessly uniting the little truth with the great truth inevitably be so difficult and dangerous? It is an enormous challenge to unite the perceptual with the conceptual in a straight line of logical reasoning. But must this progress take thousands of years and oceans of blood? Apparently, it looks like it, but I would say that it's mostly because people have been raised to support lies, and when they grow up and potentially find out they have been lied to, they are not going to tell that they have been lied to, or judge those people who force-fed them those lies. They are going to support the lies rather than go for ethics, right? So if we look at the technological and economic progress of mankind, we see more or less a flat line for countless millennia, followed by massive and asymptotic spikes over the past few hundred years. It is inconceivable that some widespread genetic mutation could account for this sudden and enormous acceleration of intellectual consistency and material success. Theories claiming that a certain snowball effect came into existence mysteriously propelled by an accumulation of all the little increments of knowledge that had occurred since the dawn of civilization can usually be dismissed out of hand as entirely ex post facto explanations, since they have no predictive value. If we understand that our staggering potential has been available to us for at least tens of thousands of years, and that there is both great profit and great pleasure in exercising it, then it at once becomes clear that we really do want to use our amazing minds. Thus, there must be a downward force that has historically acted to crush and enslave the natural liberty of mankind. A downward force that has historically acted to crush. Yeah, okay, it's again this language, right? He's trying to manipulate me into thinking in a certain way. He hasn't been doing any kind of rigid philosophy until now, right? He is manipulating my brain into thinking a certain way. He might not even know that's what he's doing, but he's making me think a certain way, right? That is not philosophical, but it does have remnants of it, right? In the realm of science, it is not too hard to see the oppressive forces that continually kept our minds in near primeval ignorance. The combination of superstition in the form of religion and violence in the form of aristocracy threatened rational thinkers with intimidation, imprisonment, torture, and murder. Just as a farmer profits from the low intelligence of his cows, and a slave owner profits from the fear of his slaves, priests and kings retained their privilege by threatening with death anyone who dared to think. I agree. The simple truth is that priests and kings were and are merely men or women, but in earlier times, mostly men, right? If not all out, only men. The simple truth is that the gods and devils that were supposed to justify the rule never existed. We have made great strides. Now he's making a claim about not only knowledge, but eternal existence, or the eternal not existing. That is a very, very big claim, right? It's like he says, okay, in order for me to prove there's no God, I have to state that it never existed. But you do not have that access. You need to stop reaching further than you can. It's because you think you need to do it, then you just sort of force yourself to do it and just say, it never existed. I solved the problem, right? That's not how philosophy works. Sad fact of the matter is that realm of morality is still lost. We have made great strides in understanding the nature and reality of simple human equality. But the sad fact of the matter is that the realm of morality is still lost in the null zone, in the destructive illusion of the middle truths. The middle truth. Okay, middle truth. Let us call the oppositional principles that reside in the null zone between sense perception and conceptual consistency the middle truths. These middle truths are the most dangerous illusions of all, because they grant the appearance of truth while actually attacking the truth. By providing the illusion that we have found the truth, middle truth actually prevent us from gaining the truth. They are the last line of defense for fantasy, predation, and exploitation. I understand where it's going, right? Since they are not only irrational but anti-rational, middle truths remain endlessly flexible as long as they serve those in power. For instance, Christianity arose out of the growing fascism of the late Roman Empire, partly by lashing out at the primitive superstition of existing theologies. Forget your old gods, we have a brand new God who is far better. Middle truths always take the form of a truth followed by a lie. Zeus is a pagan superstition, is a true statement which was openly made by Christian proselytizers. The lie that followed was Yahweh is not a pagan superstition, but a real and living God. We can personalize this a little bit more with an example that will be familiar to anyone who has ever counseled a dysfunctional friend. My last boyfriend was a real jerk, she will say, and you will fervently agree, my new boyfriend is really great though, she will add, and you will try not to roll your eyes. Okay. From Yahweh to your weird girlfriend. It is very hard to replace one illusion with another. Well, it's even harder to go from illusion to no illusions, right? Okay. The British government is a tyranny, tried the American revolutionaries in the 18th century, and after evicting the British troops, then they set up their own government and started attacking their own citizens. Well, yeah, that's right. Aristocracy is an unjust abomination, cried other revolutionaries who then set up the tyranny of the majority of the form of democracy. Middle truth can also exist in science, and I'm getting a bit tired of this. Yes, I read history. I am a master in history. I'm going to lecture you about history and how. Come on, can't you get into the meat of the matter? Let's get going with this, right? Religion is another middle truth. One of the dangerous nature of different remains largely unknown. God is a John Alexander, middle God. Christianity, postmodernism, displays Marxism until the great truth are achieved and united with the little truth. Middle truths are just a rotating phalanx of exploitative and destructive falsehoods, specifically designed to prevent the achievement of the great truths. And the great truth are always achieved from the little truth. The world falls because a rock falls. Okay, that's deep. Okay, middle truth and exploitation. Do I have to? No, I don't have to, because it's my. I would say I'm not going to. This seems like a lot of word salad. Parasites and the philosophers who all oppose all intellectual error, the great truth, 2,500 years Platonic forms, effective parasitism, the most effective parasites. Strange that this is an example. Little truth. We are still doing the truths. Okay, so I encourage you to read for yourself. I'm not going to. It's just one long exposition of sort of historical context of morality and these truths and middle truths and great truth and so on, that talks about parasitism, how it's been used as a parasitism, I would presume, and I will let you do that on your own accord. So next time we will start off with part 1 in this, not part 1 in my series, but part 1 in the book, which is a theory, and that is going to be interesting to jump into. So I hope you enjoyed. Please leave a comment, a like, or subscribe, and see you next time. Bye-bye.